Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're jumping into a new explainer that decodes what is essentially the ultimate high stakes balancing act operating behind the scenes of literally every single society on Earth. Whether we're talking about a bustling modern metropolis or a tiny rural farming village, it doesn't matter. The exact same fundamental puzzle is being solved every minute of every single day. So, it all starts with one incredibly simple question. Why can't we just have everything we want, right? It introduces the villain of our story. This is the fundamental, unavoidable reality that kicks off all economic decision-making. We, as humans, have completely endless desires, but the universe, well, it just doesn't hand out endless supplies. To untangle this complex web, we're going to follow a really logical path today. First, we'll define the ultimate economic problem. Then, we'll categorize our scarce resources, ask the three central questions every society has to face, explore the quest for total efficiency, and finally, look at the very real costs of mismanagement. Starting off with part one, the ultimate economic problem, the clash of desires and reality. Here is the core conflict in a nutshell. Human wants are infinite. Think about it. The second you get the newest smartphone, you suddenly want a bigger TV. The moment you finish a great slice of pizza, you're already thinking about dessert. Our desires actually multiply as civilization advances. But on the flip side, the means to actually satisfy those wants, our factors of production like land, labor, and capital, they are strictly limited. And to make matters even more complicated, those limited resources have alternative uses. Take a piece of land, for example. You can use it to grow a massive field of wheat, or you can pave it over to build a factory. But you absolutely cannot do both at the exact same time. Because of this, society is constantly forced to make really tough choices. This inherent problem of relative scarcity and choice is what we call the economic problem. Moving on to part two, categorizing our scarce resources. What do we actually have to work with here? When we actually sit down and map out everything at our disposal, resources fall pretty neatly into natural and man-made categories. We've got our biotic, renewable resources like forests, which thankfully can be replenished. But looking across the board, without a doubt, the most vital asset is human resources. At the end of the day, it is human intelligence that transforms raw materials into valuable, usable goods. Now, while some of those resources can renew, exhaustible abiotic resources, things like fossil fuels and minerals, are essentially fixed. Their formation takes millions of years, so once we use them, they're gone. They gradually disappear. And that makes their careful, deliberate allocation absolutely essential for the survival of any economy.
Which brings us to part three, the three central economic questions, or society's universal coping mechanism.
Because those tough choices simply have to be made, every single society faces three massive questions to figure out how to allocate their scarce resources. First up, what do we actually produce? Are we focusing on daily necessities or luxury goods? Second, how do we produce them? Do we rely heavily on human labor or do we invest in heavy machinery? And third, who actually gets to enjoy them? Let's look a little closer at that third question, the problem of distribution. Say a farmer produces 10 tons of wheat. Answering for whom to produce means we have to figure out exactly how that output is distributed. How much goes to the laborers who sweat in the fields? How much rent gets paid to the landowners? And to what extent does the capital employed, like the tractors and harvesters, need to be compensated? And different economic systems tackle this exact puzzle in drastically different ways. Capitalist economies generally rely on profit motives and the purchasing power of customers. Socialist economies focus entirely on societal needs, prioritizing labor. Meanwhile, mixed economies try to strike a pragmatic balance, letting the free market handle profitable goods while the government steps in to provide the critical essentials. Now for part four, achieving total economic efficiency. This is the ultimate goal. I want you to picture an animated factory scale balancing perfectly. Imagine an incredibly meticulous efficiency expert walking across the factory floor, tweaking everything to ensure absolutely zero waste is left on the floor. Every single machine is operating at peak output without taking away from another sector. This brings us to the two true benchmarks of economic efficiency. First, production efficiency. The scale is maxed out. It is impossible to produce more of one good without reducing the output of another good. Second, distribution efficiency. It is impossible to make any person better off without making someone else worse off through redistribution. So, the guiding principle here is that maximum output is produced at minimum cost, using the least possible scarce resources. That is the gold standard. Our efficiency expert guarantees we are stretching our finite resources to their absolute limit. Finally, part 5, the cost of mismanagement. Why this perfect balance actually matters. Avoiding resource misuse, waste, and idleness is absolutely critical. Efficient management isn't just about padding corporate profits, It's about conserving finite resources for the next generation. It's about minimizing devastating environmental impacts, lowering costs, and actively promoting social equity by bridging those wealth disparities. Because if we fail at this, mismanaged resources don't just cost us money, they actively stunt economic development. And there's a massive distinction here. Economic growth is pretty narrow. It's just making the financial numbers go up. But economic development is much broader. True development requires resources to be efficiently utilized without remaining idle or misused. Mismanagement leaves potential on the table and stunts true progress. So, I want to leave you with this thought, to evaluate our own society. The next time you're watching the news or looking at the state of things, ask yourself, is our economy truly developing, or are we just experiencing narrow growth while leaving wasted resources on the factory floor? Keep questioning the choices around you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.